The Bears back to work after a refreshing bye break. They get the Lions coming here. Cole Kmet says the last 5 games are all winnable. He's in playoff mode. Does that amuse you or you agree?
Well, let me look at the schedule. So they have the Lions this week. They almost beat them a couple weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. Then they go to Cleveland to play Joe Flacco and the Browns. Then they play the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. They play the Falcons. I mean, not impossible that they win out or go 4-1, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you got to do things to give yourself hope, and good on Cole Kmet for staying engaged. And, you know, if they go, I don't know, if they were going to 4-1 in the NFC, would 8-9 get you in? Maybe, right? Like maybe. So, I mean, because I think the last seed right now is 6-6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
it is.
Because the Vikings, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Packers are all kind of clustered there. I believe that's the 6 and 7 seeds are both at 500 right now. So, yeah, I guess not impossible. Not impossible. How about that?
Yeah, so improbable, but not impossible.
There's a chance.
There's a chance, baby.
There he goes. So Albert, we know that there's already been head coaching firings already, and we're going to get more when we get to Black Monday. So what about Matt Eberflus and the head coach for the Chicago Bears? Like, what are you hearing about that situation? Because there's several ways to go about it. You could keep the coaching staff intact, or you can make wholesale changes.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, I don't know that any final decision has been made. Now, I would say, like, a month ago, it did feel like a fait accompli that, you know, like that they were going to be making a head coaching change. And, you know, like, obviously, you know, the Harbaugh rumors have been out there for a little while, and there's a natural connection there. And, you know, but Kevin Warren is new, so he, you know, wasn't responsible for hiring the guys who are in charge now. You know, they played better, though, and that's the thing. Like, you're starting to see progress, and you're starting to see the things that, you know, Matty Eberflus and Ryan Poles and those guys were talking about in the summer. So, you know, I think these things remain fluid. Here's the other thing that can kind of affect things too, guys, and I think this is like something that is starting to happen every year now because there's so many changes. You know, I'm not sure like the coaching pipeline is like flush with like obvious candidates. So, you know, what can happen is a team, you know, really struggles early in the year, and you get to like Halloween, and it's like, okay, like we're going to be like our team is going to be making a change after the year, and then you start to play a little better, and you look in, you know, mid-December at like what's out there, and like, you know, what the landscape looks like as far as coaching candidates go, and I mean, let's put it this way, guys, like get beyond Ben Johnson, right? Like the Lions offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
How many obvious candidates are there out there?
I mean, is the OC, and I've heard the name of the OC in Jacksonville, Press Taylor. I've heard
right.
Ben Johnson, and the OC in Cincinnati, I heard, is highly regarded.
Brian Callahan, yeah, and those guys are highly regarded. But is that like, oh my God, we need to fire a coach to go get one of these guys?
But if
you're like, that's the point I made. That's the point I'm making. Is I think that's what happens a lot of times when you get to this point in the year where your teams have been languishing at the bottom of the standings for the balance. You look at it and it's like, all right, like, so we need to move on, or it's time to move on. But then, like, what's behind door number 2? And we're getting to that point in the year where it's like, okay, what's behind door number 2? And what's behind door number 2 right now is like guys who I think are really good coaches, right? Like guys that you have a chance to be great head coaches. Like I love Brian Callahan. I think Brian Callahan's going to be a fantastic head coach when he gets his shot. But are those names going to fire up fan bases, right? Like if you're a team president, is that worth like completely detonating your franchise over? I don't know. Now, if you're making a run at Jim Harbaugh, maybe we're talking about something else, you know, because that is something that would probably excite a fan base. And that is something that you would look at and say, okay, like maybe it is worth turning things over and at least rolling the dice with a guy that's won everywhere he's gone. But, you know, I don't know that you're looking at like the current coaching crop and saying to yourself, yes, you know, we need to completely blow up what we're doing here to bring one of these guys in.
That's college and pro then, right, Albert?
Right. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, well, in college, I mean, who is there in college? that you
Ryan
look at?
Day reportedly has got his agent seeing if there's any team that would be interested in him as a head coach.
Is that out there? I didn't see that out there.
Yeah, I
but-
read that last night.
Okay. Well, you're gonna have to send me the link for that story. If that's, I mean, I think Ryan's always sort of had his eyes on the NFL, to some degree, and so, if it wouldn't surprise me if at some point, it would surprise me if it was this year, but it wouldn't surprise me if at some point he winds up in the NFL.
If the Bears pick number 1 and they decide to keep Justin, more likely that they trade the pick for another haul, or could they take Marvin Harrison at 1? Because the last wide receiver to go number 1 overall was Keyshawn in 96,
right.
Dave Parks in the early 60s, and Irving Fryer in 84. That's it. So do they take a receiver there, or they trade the pick?
I they trade the pick, and I think given what I think a team would give up to go and get Caleb Williams, if you aren't in love with Caleb Williams or you don't like the option of Caleb Williams over Justin Fields, and remember, like, for whoever's making that decision, it is like, it's not just you're trading Justin. You're moving off of, or you're keeping Justin Fields and you're dealing off the chance to get Caleb Williams. It's also the contract situations, and Justin Fields has one more year of, real cheap labor on his contract, and then things get more expensive after that. Whereas, with the Caleb Williams or Drake May, you're hitting reset on the rookie contract clock at quarterback. So that's a factor as well. But if you have made the decision that you're going to stick with Justin Fields and you're going to go with Justin Fields going forward, well then, I think somebody, whether it's somebody 3 or 4 or 5, is going to want to come up and get that pick, and it's going to give you a haul for that pick. And I think, the cool thing, if you're Chicago in that spot, is if you've only got to go back a spot or 2, you can get that haul and still wind up with Marvin Harrison Jr.
It's speculation, but I could make a case that's, 7 or 8 teams could change their head coach at the end of the season. Could some teams stick with their head coach, including Matt Eberflus, if there aren't really viable candidates out there?
I mean, I think that's definitely something that, like we just spoke about in the previous segment, where, you look at the landscape and it's okay, like, do we stick with what we're doing now, especially if you have some momentum towards the end of the year, or is it time to start over? And what the field out there looks like, what again, the Brian Callahans, the Ben Johnsons, the Mike Kafkas, like, does that excite you enough where it's like, yes, we need to dive into this coaching pool and start over again? I think in some cases it's, you might not. And so, like, if you're New Orleans with Dennis Allen, or you're Tampa with Todd Bowles, the Bears, obviously, you mentioned with Eberflus, is there enough out there where, you're saying to yourself, yeah, it's time to blow the whole thing up and start over again? And, again, like, I think it's sort of a result of, like, the constant coaching turnover, where, guys get hired after 2 or 3 years as coordinators, and, they kind of, like, the NFL chews through these guys. If you have, an average of 7 or 8 openings every year, eventually the pipeline's going to run dry. And I think that's where we've been the last couple of years. So, yeah, I think there certainly could be a team or two that, like, looks at it and maybe knows of a mind to move on or to make a change. And then they look at, the pool of candidates out there and say to themselves, yeah, you know what, I think we're maybe better off seeing if we can make this work, and see where this is another year from now.
Do we sometimes overvalue high draft picks? I'm not saying stars don't come from there, but I'm looking at that 07 draft. The Raiders took Jamarcus Russell, bust. Lions took Calvin Johnson. Joe Thomas, the best pick of the 3, maybe. I mean, played 10,000 consecutive snaps at left tackle. Gaines Adams went 4th. Levi Brown went 5th. LaRon Landry 6th. Adrian Peterson stud. Jamal Anderson, Ted Ginn, Amobi, Okoye. You know my point here. Like, oh man, you very easily could have had a busted pick there.
Okay, but then like go to 2011, right? Cam Newton, Von Miller, Marcel Darius, A.J. Green, Patrick Peterson, Julio Jones, Alton Smith, Jake Locker, Tyron Smith, Blaine Gabbert, J.J. Watt. So that's 11 picks. How many Hall of Famers do you have in that group?
A lot.
I mean, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, so
right.
A lot of this can depend on the draft year. And look, like I do think like one thing to consider this year is that this is considered a very good draft class. Like I had people tell me, I had a GM tell me after last year's draft that he thought, and this is obviously going to sound silly because of what CJ Stroud's done, but like this guy told me, he's like, I think the top 6 players in next year's class would be the first 6 picks in this year's draft. You know, meaning the first 6 picks in 2024 would have been the first 6 picks in 23. And so he was talking about Caleb Williams, Drake May, Olu Fashanu, Marvin Harrison, Dallas Turner. You know, Brock Bowers was one of the guys that he really liked. So this is seen as, you know, one of those drafts that's, you know, once every 2 or 3 years you have a class that's really strong at the top, and that's what this group is. So, you know, I think part of the equation, if you were to trade out of having a high pick, is, you know, like the idea that you want to stay within a certain range so you're able to get one of those premium players with whatever lower pick you're going to have. And, you know, it's really, really interesting, too, is just, I mean, you know, I think the Bears are in such a fascinating spot, you know, versus where like an Arizona is, where like Kyler Murray can legitimately play the Cardinals out of the range to take his replacement, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, like Justin Fields can't really do that because he has no control over what the Panthers do. And, you know, it certainly looks like the Panthers are going to have that first slot, which means the Bears get the first pick.
Albert, which ankle sprain hurts more, Pickett with the Steelers or Lawrence with Jacksonville last night?
I don't know. What do you think? Getting stepped on hurts. So
yeah, big time.
I maybe Lawrence. I don't know. Maybe you go Lawrence. What do you guys go with?
Lawrence. I think Lawrence. I mean, after seeing C.J. Beathard out there, I think that hurts the Jags big time.
And now we get to watch Mitch.
Oh, you mean? I thought you meant physically hurts.
They both hurt. They're both hurt.
Oh no. I thought you meant physically hurt.
You know
no,
what
I think it's definitely Trevor Lawrence.
And we get to watch Mitch.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's definitely Trevor Lawrence. The Steelers. How much of all right? So like, just compare the two. How much of the Jaguars' success would you attribute to Trevor Lawrence? Probably a lot, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
How much of the Steelers' success this year would you attribute to Kenny Pickett?
Not much.
Right.
That's all. That's all the head coach. There, right? Yeah.
Like I don't think the drop off from Kenny Pickett to Mitch Trubisky, I don't think it's massive, right? The drop off from Trevor Lawrence to C.J. Beathard is. So I think you have your answer there.
How much money did Jake Browning make yesterday for the future? That's amazing.
I love cases like this, Hoodie. It's like with Josh Dobbs, right? Like Josh Dobbs is not going to be someone's like long-term answer as a starting quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. But like Josh Dobbs just probably bought himself a decade in the NFL. Like for the next however many years, he's going to be making 7 figures, and that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like, now he's not going to get a Joe Burrow contract or a Mahomes contract, but like he has set himself up to have a long NFL career. And I think Jake Browning's done the same thing now, right? Like it's the old Josh McCown thing. It's like no one thinks that if your starting quarterback goes down that like the backup is going to come in and save the day. But if the backup can make you competitive over like a 4 or 5 week period, that's a really valuable thing, you know? I mean, look at the Jets, right? Like if you can just get like average quarterback play out of your backup, like that's a really, really valuable thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think Jake Browning like puts himself in position now, like he has gone from the fringes of the NFL to now like having an opportunity to be somebody's backup for the next 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't mean he's going to stick in one place. He'll probably have to bounce around a bunch, but I mean, I would say like the Josh McCallans, the Colt McCoys of the world, like it's a good living, right?
Yep.
And it's a
Chase
lot less
Daniel will tell
hazardous.
you that.
Huh?
Chase Daniel would tell you
Oh
that.
yeah. Chase Daniel's the captain of that team, right? Like, so you make a good living, right? You might have to move around a little bit, but that's okay, right? And it's actually less hazardous than a lot of other positions in football. Maybe one of the least hazardous positions, right, is being the backup quarterback. Like, you're probably going to come out of that feeling okay too when you're 35, 40 years old. So yeah, shout out to Jake Browning. Looks like he's going to have a long NFL career ahead of him based on what we saw last night.